Hello and welcome to Unwatchables, the film podcast, where 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous movies. I am Marc Dottavio.
I'm Seth Troyer.
And today we welcome back film critic Bilge Ebiri for one of the most significant flops of our time from one of our most significant directors. Francis Ford Coppola is no stranger to highly publicized cinematic debacles, but few have been as long coming as Megalopolis. The Godfather director put up $120 million of his own money to fund his decades-in-the-making passion project, a philosophical sci-fi epic plagued by trouble all the way from production to promotion to its chilly reception. Together, we will decide whether it's one of his misunderstood masterpieces or if it was understood very well indeed. So we are very excited to welcome Bilge Ebiri, one of the country's leading film critics for New York Magazine and VULTURE. He's also written for The Village Voice, The New York Times, Rolling Stone, Slate, The Criterion Collection, and many more. Bilge, thank you so much for returning to Unwatchables.
Thank you for having me. I feel like this is one of those movies that I could not stop writing about last year, and we'll see how long it takes us to talk about it.
Yeah, we can't let this one go. I think you're just the right guest to finally talk about this. And we have been holding out for a while. Back when this was a new release, we considered covering it as well. We wanted to make sure that we had the right guest for it.
And we needed Bilge.
Yes.
Thank you.
Nobody better for that. And was that the main reason that this stuck out to you? Was there any other reason it was kind of on your mind, or maybe just why it was so fascinating in the first place for you?
Well, I'd heard about this movie for years. Coppola briefly announced it sometime in the 90s, around the time of Bram Stoker's Dracula. He might have even announced it before that, but I remember this being on my radar as one of these kind of ambitious films he had that he wanted to do after he sort of got back into Hollywood's good graces. And over the years, you'd hear, oh, Coppola might actually make Megalopolis finally. And it never really happened. A script leaked at one point, kind of an earlier version of the film. He would openly talk about it. I mean, I interviewed him in 2020 at the time of the re-edited, re-released Godfather Part 3. And we talked about Megalopolis. And at that time, he said, actually, I still want to find financing for it. I'm considering, selling my vineyard to finance it myself.
And you personally encouraged him, and
I said, listen, Francis, let me pull out the old calculator here. I don't think there's any way you can lose money on this one.
You're right.
But, he's always taken risks like that. At the time, he said that I did not think we were ever going to see Megalopolis again. I mean, it didn't feel like he was getting ready to make a new film. He seemed to be really into the idea of just re-editing the old stuff. And so when it was announced that he was doing it, I was delighted. I was tracking this movie, while it was being made. I was tracking it before it was released. I was there at Cannes for the first screening of it. I was there for kind of the crazy divisive responses. And all along the way, the other thing is, I would write about Megalopolis. I would write, columns about it. There was that period when it had just screened for some industry people in LA, and there was a lot of like weird quotes coming out of it. And I wrote a little column about that. At the time, I hadn't seen the movie. And then after I saw the movie, I wrote a review of it. And then, every time something flared up, I became sort of the go-to Megalopolis guy, mainly because for a while I was the only person, in the office who'd seen it. But I also had a lot to say about it because, Coppola is a guy I care about his work deeply. I've followed his career over the years. I've talked to him a couple of times. He's somebody who I think is just fascinating as a figure. So like I was fascinated. Like it's one of those things, once you review a movie very often, there's maybe like a 2 or 3 week period where you're still kind of writing about it and thinking about it and arguing about it. But after a while, it sort of dies out. It's rare for a film to just continue living in your mind and you keep revisiting it or keep thinking about it or keep wanting to write more about it or keep having ideas about it. It happens often with like really like great masterpieces like Oppenheimer is a movie I'm still thinking about and perhaps even writing about. But something like Megalopolis, while the film has a lot of issues, like I'm not even sure what I think of it as a movie, despite having reviewed it. I still think about Megalopolis, and I still am occasionally seized with the desire to watch Megalopolis again. I mean, it's the Unwatchables podcast, but really, it's secretly a rewatchable. But it's and that's also something that I think Coppola's work does tend to traffic in. Like, he's had a number of films that were initially received very negatively or very divisively, but just over the years, people just are kind of pulled to them and revisit them, even for their flaws, even kind of like, this thing was so crazy. I can't believe he made it. Let me go watch it again. I mean, that was Bram Stoker's Dracula for me. I would just keep revisiting it because I'd be like, what the hell happened here? And after a while, I was like, wait, this movie rocks. Like I've seen it 7 times now, and I think it might be a masterpiece. I don't know that that's going to happen with Megalopolis, but I'm fascinated by the fact that a film that has so many issues swirling around it can just still exert that kind of pull for me.
That seems to be the success that he has achieved, that everyone can agree on, that he has. I think he's kind of like an American Herzog or something, that he has this, like, every film is like this white whale that he's hunting, and like everybody says it can't be done, and it's happened time and time again with him. But this seems like it was like the ultimate, like, setting out to be his swan song, his biggest, boldest, craziest. So much happening, and it's like the Wikipedia page is already like 1,000 page long. Feels like, which, I mean, yeah, that is what's exciting about it. I do agree that it grows in your head. It is just like such a fascinating, audacious project for all those reasons that you can tell like there's somebody behind this. I think, yeah, the actual film itself, which is always the problem, but like it definitely, I think everybody has a little bit of that in them, whether they liked it or not, is that like maybe it would have just been even more incredible if it just would have never ever been made. Just been one of those like great fish that got away that we can always talk about and dream about, and maybe look at the weird little bits of footage. Like, I didn't know that he was filming this in the 90s, like up to like some of the footage was used in the film too, of like pre 9/11. I was reading about that, like footage was used in the film. He was like just doing like screen tests and doing like establishing shots. Just kind of crazy. There just would have been such a breadcrumb trail, even if there wasn't a movie.
Yeah, and the way that it exists now is kind of like this is a version of the many, many different ways that it could have turned out had he done this at many different times. And it is kind of amazing. There's few directors who have this many examples of films like this going throughout their entire career. Obviously, just going back to Apocalypse Now, that's like the movie that vindicated the whole idea of the over budget, over schedule, hubristic passion project that was expected to be a disaster, and I think was pretty quickly it turned the tide when it first came out as being, wow, sometimes this doesn't end up being one of the like most visionary films ever made. And then he kind of followed that right back to back then with another big stab with One from the Heart, which we also covered on this podcast, from the view
yin
of
and
the
yang,
the Heaven's Gates Ishtar style, debacle, which it was compared to Apocalypse Now. Certainly that movie has come to be more appreciated these days. And I think we came down on it not being a disaster. I don't think that it quite works or comes together maybe the way he wanted to, but it did definitely essentially bankrupt him and kind of put him in director's jail for maybe the rest of his career, because things really did kind of take a different path or a
For
different
sure
tone
played a part
after
into
that.
why you couldn't make something like Megalopolis just like off the cuff here.
Yeah, so given how far back all that goes, it does feel like the stakes are higher now in that, who knows if he'll ever make another movie after this. There's fewer movies like this, big risks like this in general from anybody nowadays. So it feels like a bunch of things coming together now in a very unlikely way, given where he's come from and how long it's been.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what kind of a risk it is, you have to consider a couple of different things. And he'll say this too. He's 80, however many years old, 86, 84. He's old, he's approaching the end. I mean, he'll acknowledge this, obviously. And his whole thing is, listen, I can actually spend all this money to do this stuff. Like, my kids are fine. They have their own careers. Everybody's all set. And he didn't actually lose all his money on this thing. I mean, he sold, I don't know exactly the actual financial logistics, but I think he sold a couple of vineyards, but he still has a ton of investments and things like that. Like, he's doing fine. So his whole thing is, listen, I'm not hoarding all this money to give to my kids. Like, they're going to be fine. So why not spend it on, my dream project? And that's the thing I've always admired about him, because so many filmmakers don't do this, right? And so many filmmakers who could do this don't do this, right? At various points in his career, when he had something he really wanted to make, he put his own money into it, or he borrowed against, his own, his collateral and stuff like that. So he was not. You hear about these filmmakers who are very successful and they can't get a project off the ground because, this studio doesn't greenlight it and that studio doesn't greenlight it. I mean, you hear these stories over the years and you're always like, listen, this person has enough money to make this movie on their own. They would never actually risk their own money. In some cases, they probably become, they finance part of it or whatever. But Coppola's thing where he's just like, listen, I'm all in. There's no plan B. We're making this movie, and if I lose my shirt, I lose my shirt. Obviously, with Apocalypse Now, it worked out to some extent. I mean, he still lost a lot of money on Apocalypse Now because it was so expensive, but the film was acclaimed. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. It was nominated for Best Picture. It's generally regarded as a classic. I'm sure he's made the money back since because it just, keeps getting re-released and everything. With a film like One from the Heart, which I adore One from the Heart, but the problem there was it just cost so much. I mean, if One from the Heart is a tiny little movie, it doesn't get that kind of vitriol, right? Because it's a doodle. It's like a doodle that happened to cost, I don't know what, $40 million, some absurd comical amount of money. And of course, it's not the movie it is if you don't spend the money. So. But I think I really do admire him for that. And I really admire him for this sort of late period move he did where he does Youth Without Youth and Tetro and Twixt, all basically financing them himself. And this is post Jack, right? I mean, this is post sort of, he has this period where he's kind of back in Hollywood's good graces and he's kind of doing work for hire. And then he sort of vanishes, it seems like, for a little while. I think that's a period when he's actually working on Megalopolis. I think he starts working on Megalopolis, and then September 11th kind of puts the kibosh on it. So, in that sense, he's kind of a true artist, and you kind of have to admire it. He, in terms of our sort of constantly being drawn back into conversations about Megalopolis, so much of the film is about the fact that a utopia isn't this fixed thing, but it's about this conversation we have about the best way to live. And I do think that for Coppola, a film is never really a fixed thing. It's like a conversation. I mean, he said this to me himself when I interviewed him years ago. he said, whenever I start a film, I'm basically asking a question. And the film is the answer, right? The film doesn't provide an answer. The film is the answer. 2 hours, 3 hours, however long that movie is. That's kind of the answer, is just everything that he puts into the movie. So for him, the end result is never this sort of fixed, contained, easily digestible point. It's this very alive, complicated, roiling beast of things. So in that sense, like Megalopolis is still happening, right? His idea for Megalopolis is that we're going to keep continuing to talk about it. And of even the live cinema element of it, I think I wrote a column about this sometime after the film came out, or maybe right around the time the film came out, but it was sometime after I had reviewed it, where I was like, Megalopolis is kind of won already, because we keep talking about this thing, and regardless of whether it makes any money or gets good reviews or wins any awards or anything like that, the fact that we're talking about this movie and arguing about it, I think that's ultimately what he kind of wanted to do with it. I don't think necessarily that he accomplished everything he set out to do as an artist with the movie, but this whole idea that he wanted to create this sort of, like, the live cinema element is us, right? The live cinema element isn't the guy with the microphone asking questions in the movie theater. The live cinema element is really all of us arguing and talking about the movie. I mean, it's been a year. Like, right, Cannes is just starting up, and it premiered at Cannes. So in a week or two, we'll have the 1 year anniversary of the world premiere of Megalopolis, and people still talk about it.
I mean, this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately with movies, and kind of been shaping my viewing a little differently with that in mind, as a reminder of, I think it's something that maybe, I don't know, in some instances, like, the modern mode of taking in content and film has gone too far the other way, where there is this idea that if you are posing a question, there must be an answer, or if you are investigating some sort of issue film, right, you have to have, like, the proper optics and, like, have everything, straight A's, right? Here, I agree that this is an instance where I think, I mean, he's very much just plainly stating it. Like, that's one of the lines, is like, the utopia is asking questions, right? Which, especially films at this level are, like, they are going to be a conversation. Absolutely. I guess it always falls into, though, then, like, you're clearly setting out for a reaction. You just have to be prepared for what reactions you might get. As much as that is, like, we all agree that's a noble cause to make us, like, create a conversation, right? And yeah, that's where you can kind of toss and turn a little bit. It's just like, well, what have you left us with? So I don't know. What do you think we've been left with, Mark?
Well, it does seem like the process of movies being reclaimed and finding their audience and being vindicated is super sped up these days. Like, I was hearing about pretty much any example I could think of, like Babylon comes straight to mind, that kind of immediately seemed to have this groundswell of cult appreciators for it, like practically why it was still in theaters, even while it was being deemed this big disaster. And so I think Megalopolis maybe has benefited from that. It did kind of surprise me, though, that it seemed like I felt like we were past the kind of media coverage that, say Apocalypse Now was getting at the time, or so many of these other films where they were constantly being reported on. Heaven's Gate is a great example, where it was almost like the press was reveling in it being a disaster and kind of rooting for it to fail. And I don't know, Bill, did you get a sense that was happening with this movie? Because I did see a lot of reporting that was like, they spent 6 hours on one shot where they were trying to just project something onto the side of Adam Driver's face, and kind of reveling in, it only made $14 million on its $120 million budget. And, like, I thought, shouldn't this be the one thing that everyone is rooting for? Even if you hate the movie, that this is like the absolute spirit of any lover of filmmaking that everybody should be able to appreciate? Or did it just seem that way to me?
No, I think you're right. I mean, that's how I felt. People would complain about, oh, Coppola's taking so long to do these shots. I'm like, I mean, I don't know. Godard took forever to make shots too. I remember talking to one of Godard's producers years ago, and he was like, I worked with that motherfucker once, and we'd spend 4 days waiting for him to have an idea. And I said, never again. And then years later, he came and asked me to produce another movie, and I was like, oh, God damn it. Sure. Yes, I'll do it. And then again, it was like, we spent 4 fucking days waiting for this guy to like decide he didn't like the blue that we painted the wall. It's like filmmaking is insanity. I mean, filmmaking makes no sense, no social or cultural sense as a process that humans should engage in. Anyone who's made movies can tell you that. It's absurd, like the whole thing turns on being able to find inspiration in the moment and capturing inspired, beautiful moments. But like the whole thing rests beyond that on getting like hundreds of people in one fixed location with like all this money, and you have this tiny amount of time, and now go, like go be inspired, find beauty, and so it becomes a storytelling medium, right? Everybody has to make sure the scripts are perfectly on point, but that leads to one type of filmmaking, right? A type of filmmaking, by the way, that Coppola has perfected in his earlier career. But the idea of a film where you actually discover it as you're making, where you kind of create the conditions for inspiration or creativity or just kind of following your muse, it's very hard to make movies like that now, certainly above a certain budget. It's actually, I should clarify, I should qualify this, because oddly enough, a lot of big Hollywood movies are made in this sort of run and gun. We don't quite have a script for the new Captain America, but we have like kind of a script for the new Captain America, and we're going to like rewrite this scene, and we're going to recast this actor, and we're going to like change all this stuff as we're shooting. But what that leads to in those cases is not creativity, but because they're preparing to redo everything, it actually leads to the exact opposite of that. It leads to, let's make sure all the lighting is flat so we can CGI whatever we want later. Let's make sure, nobody's acting against anything particularly notable, so that we can because we don't have a villain yet, and we're gonna CGI the villain in later. So it leads to that kind of lack of creativity. Whereas I think what Coppola was trying to do was trying to find interesting ideas as he was shooting. Now, again, the man hasn't made a movie in a while. So I think there was also just this tension between the way things are done now and the way things were maybe done. I mean, it's been 20 years since when was Twixt? It was a while ago.
2011.
2011. Okay, so 12 years ago by the time he's making this. But especially for a film of a large scale, it had been a while, and with effects and all that stuff. So I think he struggled a bit with that, but that's okay. He's Coppola. You kind of have to give him the grace to do that. He created the world you're living in. Show him some patience,
I was kind of surprised to see how seat of his pants the process of making this film sounded like for something that he'd been working on for so long. And maybe this is a good jumping point for us to just really get into the specifics of this movie now. Because apparently this idea started percolating with him in 1977 while he was still working on Apocalypse Now. Mm-hmm. He tried actually producing it in 1989 and then again in 2001, and things like 9/11 and just really the state of his career, all the difficulties that we had been talking about, and his, the box office disappointments that kind of kept recurring throughout his career, I think made people hesitant to fund him. And I think that I do think that's really baked into this movie, with maybe some of the good things, but also some of the problems, is that especially when you're talking about something that's futuristic and it has a very, cultural commentary aspect to it, this does feel to me like something where ideas were slowly added throughout very different eras through the 80s, 90s, 2000s. And combining that with this encouraging actors to improvise and kind of writing scenes during filming, that it's kind of really hard to keep everything holding together at that point and to create a consistent vision or world, maybe, that, especially like you said, working at this kind of a scale, it especially when you're talking about futuristic things, where there's a very different idea of the future and alternate realities depending on what decade you're talking about. So it's weird to see elements of how the future might have seemed in the 70s or 80s or in 2001 or today. And boy, a whole bunch of disparate things ended up in this movie.
And head scratching sort of, again, like posing of a conversation, but certain ideas here that are posed that don't really go in a lot of places that I'm too, excited by. The main thing being, of course, the great man sort of narrative going on at the center of it, which is, I think, it's not something that I'm totally allergic to. I don't think it's something that you can't properly do in 2025. It's just he must have been told, at least by somebody, that entering into such a thing is going to be tough in these days, because we've only become more and more strict in our sort of antagonism against great men, right? Or the Steve Jobs and the Bezos and all these people, and we're being led by a great man in America, quote unquote.
Not a lot of Ayn Rand appreciators anymore, unless we're getting into some dicey territory.
Well, I mean, actually, there are probably. It is entirely possible there are more Ayn Rand appreciators today than there were even back
Maybe
in
that's
the day.
The issue.
Right.
Okay.
But I think, but you're absolutely right in that the film bears the marks of all the times that he tried to make it clearly. I mean, because he's had this script that he's been working on, and I told you that a script had leaked, and this was an older script, and I read it, and there's a lot of stuff in that script that's in the movie, right? Mm-hmm. And I was fascinated by certain things that had kind of lived across these decades and wound up in the movie. But there's also this other thing, which is so much of the film, to me, feels like the imaginings of someone who clearly grew up in the 50s, right? I mean, its vision of the future is so kind of cliche futuristic in a way, right? I mean, I don't mean the vision of the future of the setting of the film, but when they imagine the future and what Megalon can build, we see those images of these projections of what life will look like. I'm like, this feels more like something I might have seen in the 50s. Not that I wasn't around in the 50s, but in my mind it feels like something that a young boy with polio in the 50s stuck in his room reading science fiction novels. That's how he might have imagined the future. That's actually one of the reasons why I like the film, because it feels so personal on that level. It doesn't feel like anyone has kind of sat down and done a polish on this to make it all kind of seamless and make it feel whole and unified. It really does feel like this is a thing this guy has been thinking about and working on and sort of tearing his hair out over for the last 40, 50, maybe even 60, 70 years, that's also why it's so fascinating. The film's flaws are somehow its virtues, right? And the great man stuff is fascinating too, because, Coppola's great man character in this film is a very flawed character. I mean, I think it's built into some of the strange dialogue of the film so that we don't quite realize. The film is very critical of this guy, of Adam Driver. Adam Driver's character is incredibly petulant and full of himself. And I mean, that whole scene with the plumb the depths of my Emersonian mind, that's him being a jerk. He's supposed to be a jerk in that scene. But it's done in such a way that it's hard to tell. It does feel sometimes like the film is very much on his side. I think part of that is because the film does shortchange Mayor Cicero and Giancarlo Esposito's character, because he is a guy who's very much about the now, as the film states it. But his thing is people are starving. We got to feed them, right? And so it's this dialogue going on in the film between, well, should we sacrifice sort of our future greatness for the mere demands of the present? Meanwhile, the mere demands of the present are people need food, they need clothing, they need shelter, like these basic things. I think the film, it would have been, I think, a more interesting movie and probably a more effective movie if Mayor Cicero had had a bit more gravity and oomph to his character, so that it really did become a debate. The debate feels a little stacked in
Adam Driver's
favor. But then again, that's also like this weird personal thing about the film. Like it feels stacked in his favor because Coppola clearly identifies with it.
Yes, and that can either be a bug or a feature depending on which scene I'm looking at. I feel
right, exactly.
Yeah, and there's really no subtext to this movie, right? Like it's all text. Everyone is very openly discussing all of these things, and one thing that could depend on the eye of the beholders. All the dialogue, it's clearly very stylized. This is not like a realistic movie, but there is this layer of what could be seen as pretentiousness, lots of declamatory conversations. They tend to speak a lot in philosophical, like overtly philosophical proclamations, quoting poets and philosophers. We even get a full recitation of Hamlet's speech by Adam Driver in one of the more interesting moments earlier on in the movie that kind of gets you in the headspace for what you're in for. That sometimes feels like it borders on camp, but without really committing to it.
I would have loved more goofiness with that, or more, or even committing more to it. I'm not really sure what to do with a lot of the dialogue.
Because in the end, I think the kind of dorm room discussion nature of everything they're talking about, Coppola's very earnest about, takes it very seriously. If you just look at the ending of the movie, I think there's something very sincere about it. Which again, when you're on that level of kind of naked earnestness, that opens you up to a lot of criticism. And it kind of depends how you look at it here. Is this clumsy writing? Is this just heightened? I think that could be a big barrier maybe for people.
Oh, absolutely. Well, his ambition is, I think, a lot of the dialogue is in verse, right? And I think what he's trying to do there is the whole Shakespeare thing of, the nobles speak in verse, iambic pentameter or whatever, and the plebes speak in, regular prose. He doesn't stick to it that rigorously, but I think it's meant to kind of evoke this sense of these people who are sort of at the top of society and their troubled, problematic relationship with those below them, although we don't really see those below them. I mean, that's another problem I think with the movie, is that
absolutely
there's shots of children behind fences, basically.
Yeah, it keeps this conversation at a very abstract level. Maybe intentionally, maybe so we can have the conversation. Maybe because if we see children starving in the street, then obviously we're going to be, well, you got to help the children starving in the street. Why are you trying to create this magic substance? So maybe he didn't want to do it for that reason. Maybe he just, he's old and he forgot. Who knows? But again, that also kind of adds to the film's fascinating quality, right? Again, every single one of these choices, whether a mistake or a success, somehow adds to the film's unforgettability.
Yeah, for sure adds to its garishness for me, I guess, is that feeling of, I mean, once we are able to address the lower class and the actual dystopian aspect of this world that we're dealing with, that which would cause someone like Adam Driver to want to push the envelope and create something so wild, is that the people are we just see these wild montages here and there, very briefly, of it's just totally destroyed parts of the city and just mob rule, which is mostly just viewed through the eyes, they drive through once, and then a lot of it is viewed through the eyes of Shia LaBeouf's character, who is sort of more of this mischievous, low-key, opportunist who is essentially manipulating the masses. Does feel maybe like a little jab against someone like Trump or something like that, of just he's just not actually one of the people, but trying to convince them that he is, even though he's aristocratic in his own way and just manipulating them, right?
I think you can definitely tell when the, Trump happened, like in his process of writing this, like where he found room to kind of throw in elements from him too.
It's there. I keep on going back to that. I just wonder, and then I feel like I'm just getting in the weeds about the sci-fi lore of it all. If there is some sort of explanation I missed, that there is sort of explanation as to why there's like computers in like one room of this movie, and like tabloids are a big deal and newspapers are a big deal, like, which feels like, again, from the draft, it would have made more sense in the 90s if this were to happen. Like, even down to like the whole arc with the virgin pop singer, like basically doing the Britney Spears thing, which was maybe more novel then, now is not very novel, that she has like she's a virgin and then, oh no, she's not. And she's all of a sudden having a crazy flamethrower, I'm gonna fuck everything video or something.
I think the best encapsulation of that is that there are QR codes they're using in an auction, yet there is no cell phone or smartphone even equivalent in the movie.
No.
So I was wondering, who's scanning these codes?
I hate to do that. I hate to get like, because I know it is operating on a level of unreality, but it just emphasizes what I know about the backstory of this taking so long to make and being written over so many years. That's really all that it makes my mind go to.
Yeah, I mean, it's all an alternate reality, so he can kind of hand wave whatever he wants away or include it if he wants. Right? There are QR codes, but there are no cell phones. Well, in this world, QR codes are read by something other than cell phones. Maybe they're read by your eyes. Who the hell knows? Right. But that stuff doesn't bother me. I mean, it doesn't bother me because it's just, like the film has no internal consistency. Like this world has no internal consistencies, so you can't really judge it by any particular rules. And also,
sure,
I think that abstraction, or the abstraction that such inconsistency leads to, is intentional to some degree. At the same time, you're absolutely right. I mean, it could be just that he has all these elements. He's running out of time to make the movie. He was eager to make it. He had, he got together $120 million. He went with what he had. And also, maybe this is another thing I keep thinking of whenever I watch this movie or think about this movie. Like $120 million, maybe it wasn't enough, like maybe he needed more money. There's so many scenes of I said this in my review, but there's so many scenes in the film where you watch a scene and you think to yourself, the scene isn't working for me, but I feel like this scene would actually work for me if this scene was also visually striking, right? There's a lot of flat cinematography in the film. There's a lot of scenes where it's like the sets are just a little too janky and it doesn't, you're not really enveloped by the scene in a way. And I feel like if the shadows were richer, if the colors were more vibrant, if the scene felt a little more shaped directorially and technically, I would find it easier to buy this sort of strange heightened language and the somewhat ridiculous things people are talking about. And there are some of those scenes where I think to myself, like, he didn't quite capture it, right? Or for that matter, like these scenes of Bacchanalia, right? Some of those moments work really well. And then some of those moments, it's like, I think these extras just like don't know what they're doing, like people are just kind of gyrating and it's like, I'm not sure this is like quite giving the kind of hedonism and wild sensual abandon that we're looking for. This feels more like an assistant director just yelled, "All right, now dance," and people are like, everybody's dancing to something different because the music is like different, not playing. It just feels a little unformed.
The wildest thing Grandpa can think of in the decline of Rome would be a bunch of lesbians or something.
Nightclub.
Yeah, like even stuff like that.
Which is interesting because he's done in the past really great work with overtly artificial, sets and cinematic techniques. Obviously, one from the heart, but you brought up Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I think is a great example of, using all kinds of split screens and overlays and
impressionism. Yeah.
And this does have a lot of, very intentionally artificial, I don't know if they were sets, but backdrops,
like when he's up on the roof
and
like Fritz
tableau.
Yeah.
But it has, I know for Dracula, he used a lot of like in-camera effects to achieve those things. And this does have this kind of glossy, like plastic digital kind of look. And you can tell there's lots of like just green screen. And that does take some of the magic out of that stuff.
The little montages and dissolves and stuff, those actually work pretty well for me here. Like those weren't I thought
that's some of my favorite things in this movie. I couldn't believe what I was seeing every once in a while.
Yeah, that stuff really worked for me. The stuff that did work less for me were kind of the dialogue scenes where it's just like, here are a bunch of people in a room and there's a desk and like, maybe there's like something in the background, but like it's the kind of the city, but maybe not, it just feels, or like when they're, when Adam Driver and, Natalie Emmanuel, is that her name?
Yes.
When they're, standing out kind of looking over the city and it's such a clearly fake set that they're kind of standing out and like looking over, the vast expanse of the city. I don't want to begrudge him that, but there's a part of me that's like, man, if this scene at all felt real, like if this moment at all felt like they were really standing out there kind of looking over the world, it would feel so much more immediate and vibrant, Yeah, and that's the situation where he's just, maybe just didn't have it,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't think he could afford the CGI that he would need to do a lot of this stuff for it to be at the level that I think, unfortunately, as much as I'm not like a gamer who's crying for better graphics a lot of the time, but these are at certain points, we are just trained, whether we like it or not, to identify that like, oh, that is just like distractingly like a video game or something like that. But even though some of what I'm seeing are like absolutely beautiful ideas, like there's the scene when the satellite comes down and they're showing these like, again, very expressionistic sort of idea of shadows of people on buildings like cowering.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful idea, but like the way the digital technology is used, it does wind up just striking me as like it just has a more tacky, like it doesn't, and it kind of takes away from the beauty of what otherwise would be wonderful. There are moments, though, I agree. There's like these crazy transparency, like layers of stuff going on, especially by the end. There's like these fever dream things that happen that are just out of this world, amazing looking. I think for me, visually, if it could have, I mean, consistency, but just like one way or the other more, if he could have gone full Guy Madden or something like that with the unconvincing like cheapness or something like that, or again, like, German expressionistic angle of something, it would have worked for me more and only helped the like unreality of it. Or if, like in a perfect world, if you just had like Dune 2 level like workforce at his, then he could have made it as convincing as anyone could.
The kind of workforce where you've got the best people in the world starting work a year ahead of time. I mean, this is also why Christopher Nolan is able to pull off the kinds of stuff he pulls off. He gets the best people, intense level of preparation 1 year out. So by the time he's ready to shoot, everything is ready. Another thing I was thinking of, I recently had to write something about Scorsese's New York, New York. This is 1977 musical or homage to MGM musicals. That was kind of a disaster at the time, and it had, has a much better reputation now. But the thing about New York, New York for Scorsese was his whole thing was, I'm trying to make a film very much in the old school Hollywood tradition of fake sets, painted backdrops, glorious artificiality of classic Hollywood, and specifically classic Hollywood musicals, along with a lot of the kind of crazy expressionistic stuff. I mean, some of the dance sequences in New York are like Busby Berkeley on cocaine. But at the same time, he was also trying to make a film in the kind of 70s new American cinema realistic grit. So his whole thing was, we're going to have all this like impeccably designed artificial crazy sets, but we're going to have all these scenes where we just like really improvise and get into our feelings, and Robert De Niro is going to go method and start screaming at Liza Minnelli, and Liza Minnelli's going to punch him, and all this kind of stuff. The combination certainly didn't work at the time. The reviews weren't great. The movie didn't make any money. Scorsese spent years kind of saying, oh gosh, like that film was a failure. It doesn't really work, but it kind of works now because it's like a fascinating glimpse into his psychology at the time. I mean, I've watched it a whole bunch of times, and every time I watch it, I see new things. But like that tension between the kind of film the two very different kinds of films he was trying to fuse together, and his relative inability to do that, or his like the greater expertise he had with one type of filmmaking and the relative inexperience he had with the other type of filmmaking, and the kind of crazy collision that resulted in, makes the film unforgettable and troublesome at the same time. And I feel like Megalopolis has a bit of that. Like there's certain things that Coppola does pull off. Ironically enough, it's like those moments of kind of expressionistic glee, right? Where the film just isn't even remotely realistic. Like those are the scenes that somehow work the best. They're just like total dream sequences.
They stop time and you don't know how or why, but they did it, and now they're kissing in the sky,
Right. Exactly. And then there's scenes where like he's like trying to work this romance between these two characters, and it's like, no, this is like these people have zero chemistry. And they're both very good actors, I mean, they're not giving very good performances, but they're great actors. And then, but then you'll see something like, so I don't know if you guys saw this story that came out a little while ago. It might have been just on social media. I don't know if it was an actual story, but the kid that assassinates Adam Driver in Megalopolis. Did you hear about this?
No.
So apparently this kid, I don't think he's like a experienced actor. I mean, he's just a little 10-year-old boy or whatever. And Coppola apparently made this kid go through like this intense period of preparation to do this part. And he made him watch like City of God and all these. I mean, this is
the tradition you're following in.
This is like a 15-second scene, and it's like, I mean, it's this crazy story about how he made this kid prepare for like
that's a
weeks
movie in itself
for this like little moment. But let me tell you, man, when I first saw Megalopolis, after like I was coming out of the theater, all I could think about was that kid. I was like, that kid was fucking great. like that moment when Adam Driver gets shot and that kid just has this like totally like stone-faced expression on his face and just like pops him one. That scene works really well. And that scene, like, there's that moment where I'm like, that's the guy who made The Godfather, right? Like, for one brief shining moment, that guy shows up. And so, like, there's just this, like, for some reason, for that moment, he clearly knew exactly what to do and what he wanted to get from this kid who, I don't even know if the kid had acted before. And that scene is great, but it's just, it feels so adrift in the middle of all this sort of weirdly heightened performances where it's like suddenly like this moment of real weird street level grit shows up in the person of this like 10-year-old boy with a gun. Anyway, but there are all these like weird tensions in the movie.
Yeah, and that I almost totally forgot about that whole element because there's so much here from when Seth brought up the satellites coming down from the sky like asteroids. You have the whole little interlude with the assassination and rebuilding his face. The time stopping, the nature of Megalon, the substance that he's using, and the whole thread with the death of his wife it all feels so much like, why was a lot of that stuff there? Like what does the wife killing have really ever contribute to anything? Is Megalon just a complete MacGuffin? Like, oh, that just happens to be the thing that he did, but the actual explanation for what it is or what it can do doesn't end up really mattering. And especially the time stopping just seems like maybe there's some sort of a metaphorical reason that it ties into everything, but I kind of don't care. It's like so much of this, and it doesn't help that the film to me just has a really choppy sense of rhythm to it. Like there's no sense of one scene leading into another or like momentum. It's almost like it's constantly just returning from a commercial break in the middle of something new. And that was maybe my biggest problem with this movie, though, is I could never get into it. It just seemed like a bunch of stuff just kept happening and happening and happening without it being shaped into a movie.
And I think that's, I mean, you're absolutely right. There are certain things like really important narrative things are just kind of glossed over very briefly. You don't quite catch certain like really important things that happen. And then scenes that don't really matter that much or don't seem to matter that much kind of are dragged on. The rhythms of the film are very strange. One thing I was always wondering about was, is he going to recut this? Like, I mean, he's recut so many other movies. Like, how many other
4-hour version?
Right. How many other cuts of this movie are we going to get? Because that also contributes to the idea of this living, breathing, ever-changing thing that, we talk about. Which, I mean, it's only been a year, so who knows? Maybe he will get back into it at some point. But the other thing is, I do think that some of this is intentional. Like he does want to sort of disrupt our rhythms a little bit because he knows he's not telling a traditional story. And that's the other thing. I was like, there's certain scenes that don't that feel like he glosses by them really quickly, certain narrative developments and things like that. But then I think to myself, well, if he tried to tell the story, if he tried to shape this story in anything resembling a conventional way, it wouldn't work because it's a completely ridiculous story. So I think he's, and there's this sort of, I mean, it's very much in the sort of new wave tradition of, I'm not going to show you the stuff you think you need to see, and I'm going to spend a lot of my time showing you stuff that you didn't think you needed to see. And that's a thing that a lot of filmmakers have done over the years. I will say, the film plays so much better on a second viewing. I don't know how many times you guys saw it, but
just the one time.
We are fresh off of it right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So because this was a thing that people said at Cannes, because I had it. I mean, obviously it was the movie everybody at Cannes was talking about, at least until Honora and The Substance came out, or Emilia Perez. But for the first few days, this was the movie everybody was talking about, and I talked to so many people who really hated it when they first saw it. And then there were these other screenings. Like for some reason, Megalopolis had more kind of repeat screenings than other movies, or it seemed to at least. And I talked to a number of people who went and saw it again. They were like, I had to see it again. And these were people who had hated it, who thought they were like in our arguments and in our kind of various, critical discussions, they were people who very much fell on the side of, you people are insane. This movie stinks. I can't comprehend what you people see in it. And then they saw it again. They were like, you know what? This movie plays so much better a second time. Because now, this is a thing somebody once said about one of my favorite movies, The Thin Red Line, which was, you kind of have to see it again. You kind of have to see it the first time to just get the anticipation out of your system.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of have to see it the second time because you first have to realize what the film isn't before you can see what the film is. Megalopolis isn't The Thin Red Line. The Thin Red Line is one of the greatest movies ever made. But that is very much, I think it is very much in that vein of like, this is a very strange movie and it knows it. And it's probably better to just like watch it once, get it out of your system, and then watch it again to see what it actually is doing. not everything works, but I will say I revisited it during the Toronto Film Festival, and I was like, this movie plays so much better the second time. It really does.
I'm curious about that. That's something I've heard from a lot of people, that they were left with this like lingering feeling, like even if they hated it, that there's something else. I kind of am envious, because I just feel a little decided about it or something.
Sure, yeah.
I'm open though. I mean, I do think, yeah, it's such a loaded experience going into, the fucking lost project of Francis Ford Coppola. It's like maybe his last movie. So it's like, oh, what is this? So like for me, it was either like it was gonna, the promise of blowing your mind, or for me, and I think a lot of viewers like me, I guess, is like, is this gonna actually be Southland Tales 2? Which I'm
people love Southland Tales now.
I kind of love Southland Tales. I like movies that are those crazy big swings that are just kind of they're ludicrous and stuff, and they're just too much. Which I don't know that this really hit me that way either. Like I still wanted to be even more convoluted and buried under even more or something, if it was going to be that, I guess.
That was a funny moment. Seth and I watched this movie together, and afterwards, basically our takes came down to, man, I wish that was more like Southland Tales. And then mine was, God, I wish that wasn't so much like Southland Tales.
It was like watching Southland Tales through Marc's eyes.
Yes, exactly.
Or I also thought about it as like, I'm also like a huge Star Wars prequel fan.
Hey. Yeah.
And
I get those vibes.
Actually felt like all 3 Star Wars prequels in one movie. And again, like maybe it was like seeing it through the eyes of someone who just is not into that and not a Star Wars fan, and also didn't have like the nostalgia I had for those, or something like that. Which I do think it's like, it does feel like his George Lucas like kind of thing going on here, like politics and all going on.
You know what it is? It has no polish, right? I mean, that's why that's a really good comparison, by the way, to the Star Wars prequels, because those, I mean, I adore the prequels as kind of a whole, and I really like Revenge of the Sith, and I quite like Attack of the Clones, and I'm a little more mixed on Phantom Menace, but like those films have no polish. They're very slick, obviously, they've spared no expense in making them. But those scripts have clearly not gone through the Hollywood grinder of everybody in the world has done a polish on this and done a pass on this, and the executives have looked at it, and all the notes have been handed down, and we've kind of hammered out anything that might be a little too weird or a little too off, and now it's just kind of this very slick, very impressive, very compelling, and very successful adventure. Right? It's also like like films by the Wachowski, like post-Matrix Wachowski films, right?
I thought about them a lot.
Yeah, like there's this like
in good
there's
ways,
this like
bad ways, always.
Yeah, exactly. There's this like this movie was made by somebody who nobody was going to be able to stop, and I kind of love that about it.
Yeah.
Over the years, those things somehow endure, and they feel more special. I mean, it's you see it with the prequels, right? I mean, I remember when Force Awakens came out, people were like, oh my God, this is great. Finally, we have a good Star Wars movie. Finally, we're getting, we're casting out the demons of the prequels.
Right. It's technically like a well-made movie that has proper arcs and, whatever your writing teacher likes it or something. But
everything is in proportion. Everything works. Every plot point is like paid off. It's like perfectly put together. And The Last Jedi comes out, and I really love The Last Jedi too. But already during that period, you see like people starting to get really frustrated with what's happening. And then obviously Revenge of the Sith comes out, sorry, not Revenge of the Rise of Skywalker comes out.
Rise of Skywalker,
and it's it's kind of like somehow by the end of that run, people are like, man, we wish the fucking prequels were back. Like everybody's nostalgic for the prequels because everybody recognizes that they were kind of one person's vision in a way, even though plenty of people work on it.
Exactly like what this is. Yeah, that this is, for better or worse. Yeah, it's the opposite. Back to, we were talking about Marvel movies and things like that being this whole like committee thing, the exact opposite of that, which of course it's going to be kind of patchy. Of course it's going to be a little hazy and incomplete like a person is. I do enjoy that about a singular vision.
Now, that said, it kind of surprised me to read about how collaborative he was with the actors in this. And I would like to talk about the performances a little bit because I don't feel like he got everyone on the same page as far as the register that they were going to be aiming for. And so I feel like Adam Driver is caught right in the middle of trying to find a way to bring like real conviction and pathos to this while indulging in the overwrought silliness of it all. And I think he has an impossible task that he just can't really figure out as far as what tone to hit with that. And then some other people like Natalie Emmanuel, I think just kind of goes for the straight-faced, kind of straightforward movie love interest performance and ends up kind of just fading into the background like any time that she's in a
pretty
scene.
Unfortunate, yeah.
My biggest surprise, though, is when I first saw Aubrey Plaza show up in this, and she's like this kind of tabloid reporter, and she's preening for the camera, and I thought, wow, could you miscast a role like any worse than this? And as the film goes on, she kind of became like my favorite part. And I'm not sure.
That hammy, wild arc. And
once she becomes the femme fatale,
like a dominatrix, like gonna be the emperor of the world or something by the end.
She well, we know that. Sorry, you're still talking. I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, I interrupted.
No. I want to hear us talk about Aubrey Plaza, because I read that his inspiration for wanting to cast her for the role was to get a Jean Harlow screwball, like 30s screwball comedy type, which again, I do not think of Aubrey Plaza as in my first 1,000 people for a role like that. And I'm not sure that's how she even comes off here. But as she takes this, turn as the movie goes on, I was feeling like she was actually in control of her performance and how she was coming off. And maybe that was partly because, from what I understand, the like scene between her and Shia LaBeouf having sex or whatever was kind of their invention. And that actually was a moment where, silly as it is, things kind of came to life for me for a minute.
I feel like, well, that term, this person got the memo, this person didn't, like that expression. And I want to say that Shia LaBeouf and Aubrey Plaza got the memo and everyone else didn't. But I think what really happened was everybody got a different memo. Right. But like Aubrey Plaza and Shia LaBeouf, I think, wind up being pitched at just the right level for what this movie is. Partly because I think the movie winds up in this like crazy place, and they're just, they're camping it up, vamping it up, whatever. The question is, did the movie start that way? Like, is it just kind of where it sort of ended up, and they wound up being on the right wavelength for it? The other thing is, of course, their characters totally work for this. I mean, their characters are so fluid in the way they move through this world, and they're so opportunistic and ambitious that it totally works for their characters. Driver has the right quality for the part. I think he's just struggling with all the dialogue. There's just so much kind of awkwardly written dialogue that he has to say, and he's a right, and he's a great actor. But I think it's tough for him. I mean, he has just the right kind of haughtiness for the part, but he doesn't get to use his charisma in the right way. Natalie Emmanuel, I think, is just like trying to get through the day because she's been thrown into the middle of this thing. She's a good actor, though. Did you guys see the remake of The Killer, John Woo's remake of The Killer that she starred in?
No.
So
I didn't know she was in that.
This was an Amazon Prime movie, but John Woo remade The Killer, and she plays the Julian Fott role, and she's great. So, because I watched Megalopolis, I mean, I'd seen her in other things, but that was the first film where I was like kind of aware of her as like an actor, and remember thinking, oh God, does this person just not really know how to act? And I saw The Killer, I was like, wait, she absolutely knows how to act. I think this is Coppola just didn't quite know what to do with her. I think, I mean, there's all these other, like, I think Giancarlo Esposito is kind of left twisting in the wind with his part a little bit.
He certainly tries, and occasionally I feel like he managed to keep an integrity there, but I do agree it ends up being a kind of thankless, impossible task.
It winds up being a thankless role for a part that should probably be a very big part in this movie, given how Coppola has conceived.
He should be the like big bad, right, or something.
Or he should be
in a way.
He should be almost as, he should have the same gravity as Driver.
Sure, flip side of the other coin.
Yeah, right. We talked about this. I mean, the film stacks the deck against him, so he doesn't really get to do anything. He just does his lines and, holds the fort, but that's about it. Sorry, you were going to say?
But I don't know if I would see. Yeah, I mean, Shia and Aubrey are my favorite in the movie for sure. And I don't know if that's the correct like note. I mean, I hesitate to like give notes to this, like, again, laser beam straight from the head of Francis Ford Coppola or whatever is of course impeded in some ways by various things. But yeah, I mean, just going bigger seems to be just, even if it's silly or winds up not even being all that funny, just going bigger for this clearly big, like high ceiling project just seems to be the mode. And I almost wish Adam did more and leaned in more. Again, I don't know if I'm asking for this to go full camp or something. I don't necessarily need it to do that. I think it is just like it's pushing for this operatic place that just like other parts of the movie just like don't get to at all. Don't get to play that role, I guess.
Yeah, and there's these weird kind of non-roles for people like Dustin Hoffman and Jason Schwartzman kind of showing up just so you can kind of spot them and then move on.
They have like two words and then they're gone. Yeah.
Well, Jason Schwartzman, he's
obviously there's that connection.
He's the nephew, so he's got to be there. I'm shocked. I mean, I'm shocked Nicolas Cage isn't in this movie because he would have been perfect.
Oh my God, Nicolas Cage as the Adam Driver character? What a totally crazy movie.
Or Nicolas Cage as anybody in this movie. I mean, Nicolas Cage could have played WoW Platinum.
Oh man,
Nicolas Cage could have played the mayor.
Even
that would have, like,
actually,
Cage versus Driver,
Absolutely.
like that would have been interesting. Or actually, what you could have done was you could have had Nicolas Cage play Caesar Catalina and Adam Driver play the mayor. That could have been interesting too.
Well, yeah, sure, it could have been the like wildness of Nicolas Cage versus the subdued sort of quiet performance of Adam Driver. Yeah,
and then the Dustin Hoffman thing. Apparently, James Caan was going to play that part. And then he died, and they got Dustin Hoffman. I don't know. I mean, that feels. I mean, look, there's that character dies halfway through the movie and is like never mentioned again, except like we see his statue. Clearly, something happened there. I don't know if it was just they just left some stuff on the cutting room floor. Either a 4-hour cut or Dustin Hoffman walked off the set or whatever. Like something happened. He just got zotzed out of the movie. So yeah, who knows?
Well, and just the fact that Shia LaBeouf is in this movie, along with Jon Voight, who I thought was only in Pure Flix movies at this point, and like he had just wandered over from
a boner joke.
Yeah,
a good boner joke, which by the way is in that original script that I read. Like that boner joke has been that thing since the very beginning.
Wow,
which I think is delightful.
Made people read first.
Yeah,
but I know Coppola did get a little bit of heat for, I mean, from what I heard, he said that he wanted to avoid accusations of this being a woke Hollywood production, and that's why he was hiring, outspoken conservative like Jon Voight, or, Shia LaBeouf's obviously had his troubles and is probably unemployable by a certain level of, studio filmmaking. And And then there were those like weird misconduct allegations that came out after the shooting wrapped. But I remember this video going around on Twitter, and then there were conflicting reports from extras about being like groped or kissed or something by Coppola.
Yeah.
Did we ever get clarity on that? I feel like you might know more about that stuff ended up, Bilge.
I don't know anything about where it ended up. I mean,
there were lawsuits.
I think it kind of died down with the. Well, I think there are some lawsuits. I don't know if they've been settled, but there's some stuff. I mean, Coppola, I think, is suing some people.
He sued Variety, I believe, for libel.
Well, did you guys see the video that they posted? That I watched the video that they posted, and it actually, because I was worried about this thing when it came out, and I was like, oh gosh, that's terrible. What Coppola is alleged to have done. That video did not a lot. I mean, again, I'm not the person to judge this, but I was watching that video, and he was just kind of going around giving people like kisses on the cheek. It didn't seem. I mean, it was like in the midst of a crowd. It wasn't. Nobody seemed to be upset. It was. I mean, odd, but like not. I did not get. And again, it's shot from far away, so you don't. I didn't see him groping anybody or anything like that. Again, who knows? There might be other stuff. That felt to me, I mean, there was, I will say this, there did seem to be a weird kind of back room conflict going on around this movie, even in just the way that different stories would leak out to the press.
Right.
And I don't know what was going on behind that. Were there people who kind of had it out for the film or had it out for Coppola or vice versa or whatever? I don't know. But it did seem to be like you'd see one story and then you'd see another story and then you see another story, and they were all kind of conflicting, and it was kind of like, I don't know what's going on. I just want to kind of watch the movie and appreciate it if possible. You guys settle this thing. I don't know if he's a sex pest. That's terrible, But at the same time, I'm kind of like, this feels a little off.
It did feel like it ended up being walked back to me. Like there were vague reports, and then there were other extras who came out and said, no, this isn't how things were at all. And I thought that ended it more or less.
I mean, that's how it felt to me. I guess if he, sues the shit out of Variety, we'll see what happens there. But and I mean, the problem with stuff like that is it comes out and it just sort of lingers, and even if it's settled or even if it becomes a thing that people realize wasn't as bad as it was, the original articles are still out there waiting for people to find them on search engines without sort of seeing the context. So there will always be people saying, but Coppola did this, he's a bad person.
Yeah, I mean, these things, and as well as like maybe the like various optics of like not necessarily great depictions of this or that in the film. Like,
sure.
I can take with not excusing him of like the possibility of like what you're saying, like behind closed doors, who knows what happened and stuff like that. But like, I can take with the grain of salt, at least, of like, it is like an 85-year-old man, like who is, like he's very much from another time. And he's especially in regards to, again, like the like various themes in the movie and the way things are like depicted this way or that way or land this way or that way. He's a very specific, like very rich director who has been around for years, and he's 85 now. I'm not expecting him to have all of that necessarily wrapped around his finger.
Sure, of course not. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Of course, then you're like, well, why are we giving a pass to people who are of a certain age? And it's kind of like, it's just kind of what we do in life. It's not like a pass,
just like not surprised, not like, whoa, wow, I can't believe this. Like,
exactly. I mean, you go to Thanksgiving dinner with an 80-year-old uncle or great uncle or whatever, and
he's gonna say something.
And it's
he's gonna cast Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah, he's gonna say, look, my friend Shia, I met at the store. I invited him to Thanksgiving dinner.
Yes, I know he's dressed as a trans person. Yes, I can explain.
One of the other, I mean, it's a very minor controversy, but I have to bring it up because Bilge appears in the Wikipedia page for this film with the whole trailer controversy. And Were you the
That'd be
one to break that story?
I was, yeah.
Please take us through this.
Well, I mean, I assume someone else would have broken it because someone else would have noticed this. I was just first, but yeah. So they've this trailer dropped in, I want to say, September, and it had quotes from sort of critics over the years criticizing what are now considered Coppola's masterpieces. Right? It had a review from Pauline Kael shitting on The Godfather, and a review from Andrew Sayers shitting on Godfather Part 2, and then, I think it had like Rex Reed shitting on Apocalypse Now, and it just kind of brought it all the way up to Roger Ebert and Owen Gleiberman criticizing Bram Stoker's Dracula. And when I first saw the trailer, I thought, oh, this is an interesting approach, because my thing was, having been through sort of the discourse, the pre-discourse at Cannes, I was thinking to myself, as divisive as the reviews for this movie have been, in some ways, the critics are actually going to wind up being this movie's best friends. Like, this isn't going to be one of those movies that the critics hate, but the public embraces. Like, once upon a time, there would have been riots in the movie theaters when this movie came out, right? Now it's just playing empty theaters, but like I think I even said this. I was like, people are going to be like, screaming at like the box office attendants to get their money back when they see this movie, So my thing was, you probably shouldn't antagonize critics, because critics are actually going to be probably the ones looking on your movie the most favorably, because they at least will bring some kind of context into it, and in some cases maybe revisit it a couple of times. So when I first saw the trailer, I thought that, and I actually thought, oh, I'm going to write a piece about the trailer. And so I went and I decided I was going to sort of find Pauline Kael's original review of The Godfather to just provide a little more context as to what that quote was. And I read her original review, and I was like, wait, this quote not only does not appear in this review, she loves the fucking movie. She thinks it's a masterpiece. Right? I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. Well, maybe that quote was taken slightly out of context. First, I thought, oh, maybe she said this about Godfather Part 2. I can totally see her not liking Godfather Part. Nope, she loves Godfather Part 2 too. And I was like, okay, maybe she said it about Godfather Part 3, which she did not like, admittedly, but she didn't say that. Those words just did not appear in any of those reviews. And I was still thinking, oh, maybe she said it in some other piece or somewhere else, and it's just, they pulled it out of there. So I said, oh, let me find Andrew Sayers' review of The Godfather Part 2. So I found his review, and then I was like, wait, the quote, his quote also does not appear in this thing. Yeah, and then at that point I mentioned this to my editor, because this was a piece I was writing very quickly, and I mentioned this to my editor. I was like, hey, by the way, I'm still working on the piece. I'm trying to dig up these quotes, and it's so far they don't appear to have been in any of these reviews. And she was like, oh my God, because at that point I'm thinking, I just haven't found the right pieces. These quotes are somewhere, because these are people who they wrote about these movies multiple times. And she's like, oh my God, is there something there? And I was like, I don't know. I'll keep looking. And that's when I said, all right, I tried to find, I can't remember if it was Vincent Canby or whoever it was. For some reason, most of these reviews were actually online. Like, you could find them online if you just search for a few minutes, even though they're older reviews. And like, I found 2 more reviews that did not have these quotes. And I was like, oh, wait, I think there's like something going on here. So anyway, we published it. And at that point, I'm like, oh, wait, I think this might actually be kind of a scoop. Let's like get it out there. Because originally it was just going to be like me responding to the trailer. So the piece went up. And of course, a lot of people read it. A lot of people were kind of angry about what was going on. And a lot of people were speculating. I mean, I speculated in my piece. I was like, I wonder why he's doing this, or I wonder why they're doing this. I'm not assuming that Francis Ford Coppola is editing this trailer. And because part of me was like, part of me was still, maybe these quotes appeared somewhere else. But then another part of me was like, are they trying to sort of just make up quotes because they know we won't look? Or are they trying to make up quotes because they want us to look and they're just fucking with us in a way? And then it later turned out that somebody had used like ChatGPT to generate quotes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which is crazy. And it was actually ingenious how they discovered this because it's also like, how do you know what ChatGPT is going to throw at any individual person? The thing they found was when they put the right prompt into ChatGPT, they got quotes from those specific critics that were featured in the trailer. So it was like those were the critics that ChatGPT was always throwing out at you, which was a good way of deducing that this had been an AI fuck up.
And whoever did this, it is such a like this is kind of where we're at in some ways. Is like this is one of those movies that is going to. They already saw this coming, whoever was making this, that it is going to be totally bait and for the letterbox contrarian or something, right? With the like, oh no, everybody said it was 1 star, but I say now that it's 5 stars, Megalopolis,
Yeah.
And it's like that is the strategy to almost sell it as one of those before it's even out. It almost feels like.
And one of the reasons why I was fascinated by that trailer initially was because I had written a piece, the piece I wrote before Megalopolis came out, when I was kind of responding to the various quotes that had come out of that first, LA industry screening. And in that piece, I talked about my own weird experience with Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was one of the first films I ever reviewed. I was in college when I saw it, and I got invited to a press screening, and I reviewed it for this little magazine I had, and at the time I was like, "Oh, Francis Ford Coppola has lost his mind. Like, what the fuck is this movie? It's totally crazy. It doesn't work at all. Like, what happened to the guy who made The Godfather?" And I sort of took that story, and the thing I was saying was, this has actually happened with Coppola multiple times. Like, it happened with One from the Heart. To a certain extent, it happened with Bram Stoker's Dracula. It happened later with like Tetro and those other films. Like, it is a thing that with Coppola, you kind of sort of never quite bet against him, even though he's flopped many times. Like, these films do actually end up having some kind of, value later. I mean, a lot of these films that he made in the 80s and even 90s that were kind of sort of dismissed at the time, a lot of them got good reviews. You look back on them now, they're really good films, like he only has 2 or 3 actively bad films in his filmography. A lot of them are like Peggy Sue Got Married is delightful.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. The Cotton Club, the director's cut of The Cotton Club is fantastic. One from the Heart I really like. Gardens of Stone is not good, but like that movie was complicated by all sorts of horrible things that happened to him. Jack doesn't work. The Rainmaker, I think, is actually like a really solid Grisham adaptation. Like there's so many films in that. Tucker, the Man in His Dream, I really like, actually.
Yeah.
Bring me Jack 2. Bring me Jack 2. Come on.
Jack, we could do that on this podcast one day. I want to take a nice hard look at Jack.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's not a good movie. It's maybe not as bad as its reputation, but it's not a good movie.
Right. Well, and you're right. I think that Lynch for it was either Lost Highway or Blue Velvet. I think probably Lost Highway. He was like, they advertised it using negative quotes. I think from Ebert in particular, actually.
Yeah, it was 2 thumbs down, Siskel and Ebert for Lost Highway, which was actually, I think, the first time I'd seen something like that. I'm sure they did it in the 70s with certain movies too, but that was the first time I saw somebody do that in a movie ad. And I remember thinking, oh, that's delightful. Now, of course, I loved Lost Highway back then. A lot of people did not. So I appreciated that they were rubbing it in their faces. But
so it just probably seemed too irresistible. Like, we want all these, it's so great that this bot spat out all these quotes, how wonderful this will be to counter all the bad press that Megalopolis is getting. And they probably didn't want to look any further past that.
And I do think this was probably like, I don't think Coppola himself had really had anything to do with the trailer. But I'm sure it came from some conversation with him where it was like, the critics didn't really like The Godfather initially either. Like I'm sure in his mind, I mean, this is the thing you always hear from filmmakers is that a lot of them don't read their reviews, and the ones who do read their reviews, they only remember the negative ones. So if a film was mixed reviews, only the negative ones stick in their mind. And if the film got great reviews, I mean, this happens over and over again. It's like I talk to filmmakers, and so many of them will say, yeah, well, that Richard Brody review of my film. I'm like, your film is widely beloved. Don't worry about what poor Richard said about your movie.
Checks in the mail, yeah.
Some of them really never do get over that stuff, and that's all you hear in interviews.
They don't. I mean, one of my favorite people to talk to is Paul W.S. Anderson. And I talked to him about, reviews because critics tend to not like his movies. And he said that when he made Mortal Kombat, like when Mortal Kombat first opened in the US, he was living in LA, and he said he had like a totally sort of empty apartment, like Robert De Niro's, place in Heat. Like he had just this completely empty, very kind of new wave space. And he said, I got all, they send you all the reviews, like the studio sends you, because back then it was print. Studio sends you all the reviews in the mail, and they've cut them out. And I just took them and I created two piles, and it was one pile was the positive reviews and one pile was the negative reviews. Mind you, we're talking about Mortal Kombat of all movies. And he said, both piles were about the same height. And he said, I don't remember a single thing the positive reviews said, and I remember every single fucking thing the negative reviews said. So
that's how our brains work.
I know, it's absolutely
how our brains work.
Right. So in Coppola's mind, he probably remembers like the three people, in 1972 who didn't like The Godfather.
They just weren't those people.
Yeah, they do. And Pauline Kael had a reputation for not liking a lot of widely beloved movies, but she actually happened to love the Godfather films. So.
Man, well, I think maybe this would be a good time to give our final thoughts on Megalopolis. We usually declare whether or not we would unwatch a film, which I don't think really applies here, unless Seth is going to surprise me. I
would rather watch Star Wars.
Yeah, we can all agree on that, I guess. I think that...
just kidding. I don't know. Maybe. Yes, absolutely.
This does get compared. I think Southland Tales really is a great comparison, except with the fact that was, somebody's sophomore film, and this was, at the end of somebody's career. And I do like this slightly more than Southland Tales because mainly the length isn't as punishing, and at least it's not trying to be funny for the entire duration in a way that I don't find funny. That I guess that probably got more.
Okay, I could push back against that. I've read so much about people saying that this movie is funny.
This movie?
Yeah.
Do you think it's trying
there's a lot of
time,
jokes
though?
in here? Like
there
the boner joke and some of Shia LaBeouf is funny.
Yeah.
But man,
it doesn't feel like that's its main thing, though.
It doesn't. That's not Southland Tales' main thing. It's not a.
Well, that's where we disagree. But we've fought about this thousands of times on this show. But one thing though that I will give Southland Tales credit for is it does seem to be very much of its post 9/11 era and about it in a way. Like it's clearly very much trying to be about the Bush years and the Iraq War years. And it does have its finger on that, whether you think it's successful or not. And we've talked about how this film does feel kind of patched together. And I don't think really settles on what reality or alternate reality it's trying to capture or comment on. And I think that's one of the fundamental problems outside of just all of the other things that we've touched on. And I do wish I was more intrigued to return to it for a second viewing than I am. That said, it would be cool if this, I know maybe he's a little too old for it, but if this was like a Thin Red Line type situation where he kind of returns after a long hiatus and then just starts cranking out more movies than you would ever think he would do, maybe it's a shame that this was such a huge project. Like, wouldn't it have been cool maybe if he took that money to make, just 3 more smaller films like he did with his last, trio of movies before this? But then again, then we wouldn't have Megalopolis. So I would not unwatch the film, but I definitely can think it does earn its debacle status in a way that you could appreciate, certainly, but it's there. But Seth, I'll let you then see where you land, and then we'll let Bilge have the last word.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm conflicted. I do. I'm just envious, I guess. Again, as I feel like quite often I wind up on the side of the person who is really just loving this. What at least is described to me more than what I see is like this layered, just confounding from just purely off the cuff, like from the director's mind kind of movie. And I think there's patches of it that is like that for me, and I get really high off of it. But I don't feel that there's enough of going one way or the other of like pure raw, like I can't believe it happened genius, and like enough of the like this is just the most uniquely strange alien mistake movie either. Um, so I wind up like kind of middling, which doesn't feel like where I should be with a movie like this. So I do look forward to a secondary viewing. I do go round and round with like the I hate to get stuck on it, but the messaging does seem to be very important to the movie, that it is trying to say something about now or something important that we could take away for now. And it feels like it really kind of feels dead on arrival with a lot of that stuff. Like basically it saying that, I don't know, that basically Francis Ford Coppola still needs to be given his money to give us dreams and things. And I agree with that on some level. There's also a part of me that has a hard time with like, well, yeah, but at the same time, I passed like some homeless people on the way home from watching the movie. And I thought about that a little bit of like, well, maybe just again, like a smaller movie and more goes to charity, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not going to get caught in that. I, yeah, I don't know. I am a little disappointed, but I hope that I can get there with this one. I would love to find more access to more joy with this one.
Maybe the next cut that comes out over the years.
Cut me.
So one thing I do want to say is he is apparently working on a new film. Coppola is.
Excellent.
He is working on like a Noel Coward adaptation. I think it's maybe going to be a musical, which I don't know, like we'll see.
Bring it on.
Yeah,
like
seriously. Yeah,
make it a swing. That's all. Yeah, absolutely.
The Southland Tales is an interesting one. I have not seen Southland Tales since like it came out, and I did not like it at that time. But over the years, I've really appreciated seeing people embrace it. That I'm kind of like, I'm just gonna accept that there's probably a lot more going on in Southland Tales than I thought at the time. I will say, I mean, I was a huge Donnie Darko fan. I was there on the ground at the Pioneer Theater in New York, midnight showings as that movie's cult grew and grew and grew. I was there every week. And then I remember when I saw the when they later released the director's cut of Donnie Darko, which I think is an atrocity. I mean, they add so much stuff to Donnie Darko. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, somebody needed to protect this guy from his worst instincts. Like somebody needed to be there in post on Donnie Darko to say no to him.
And of course, bring up.
But like Southland Tales is such a great example, though. It's just similar to like, even though he's a lot younger, like he's in his 20s when he's making Southland Tales, and Coppola is in his 80s. Like it is such a great example of like it's the same phenomenon. It's like there's nobody to say no to him, and we kind of have to like appreciate that for what it is, because so very often there are people to say no to. There are enough great movies that are made because somebody checked a filmmaker's worst instincts, that sometimes we got to allow some of the crazy movies to be made because nobody would say no. But the difference is in the two movies I would actually talk along, like along with Southland Tales, I would also talk about a movie like Eyes Wide Shut, because I was there when that movie opened as well. And Southland Tales is as a film that feels like so kind of powered by like the moment, like it feels so much of its time. And I think that's what actually makes it special. And Eyes Wide Shut, I remember when it came out, a lot of people thought it was so out of touch. Like people were like, "Oh my God, Kubrick is like," I mean, he died by that point the film came out, but they were like, this man was living in his own little world, and he had no idea what sexual mores are like today or what relationships are like today, and he was completely out of touch with like reality. And he made this, and people hated that movie. And people hated that movie. And now, people think it's a masterpiece. I loved it at the time, and I'm tickled pink that its reputation has grown. But when a movie does feel very out of touch, is also sometimes the kind of movie that years later will start to feel timeless. That's kind of the trade-off. Like you release something that feels totally out of touch with its moment, but maybe that movie will one day actually feel timeless in a nice way. I don't know that will happen to Megalopolis, because it's not that Eyes Wide Shut has kind of a consistency that Megalopolis doesn't. Megalopolis isn't like quite timeless. It's like of a variety of different times, some of them contradictory. But again, that's what makes it fascinating. I mean, in terms of, I would not unwatch it. I would only unwatch Megalopolis if then the dream of Megalopolis could sort of endure. Like then I could be like, oh my God, Megalopolis, Coppola's
unknowable,
unknowable dream project, as opposed to, all right, well, we saw it and man, that's kind of janky,
It's always perfect as long as it doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you do think of this as just one version of it, and imagine all the other alternate timeline versions of this movie, is interesting to think about.
Yeah, and then you guys obviously just saw it, so you didn't get to see it with the live cinema interaction. You know about that though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which also, I mean, this was the thing at Cannes. By the time that guy showed up and asked the question from the stage, which later, when the film was released and they did that, it was pre-recorded. Like that stuff was actually part of the movie. So the person with the mic was just pantomiming. I think at Cannes, it was an actual person. Like it really did feel like this was a guy in the room asking the question. Maybe the sound system was especially good there. I don't know, but it really did feel like it was a person asking the question. But like the film was so crazy up until that point that even that little thing, like that moment, which is such a nutty thing to do in a movie, afterwards, we had so many things to say to each other about the film, and that was like so low on the list of, oh my God, and what was that all about? Like, because there's so many crazy things about the film that moment itself is just sort of just another crazy thing that it does. Which, you kind of have to hand it to a movie that's like that,
It's preferred. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Things are so good at just being okay now. I feel like movies are so good at that. Just being like, well, I didn't hate it. It's just like the mantra of the day almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I feel like we are going to see...
Let me love it, yeah.
We're going to see less and less movies like this. Less filmmakers are going to have winery fortunes to cash in to do all of this. So I think we can all get behind the sentiment and the spirit of this.
Yeah, I'm getting a winery. I think I'm going to go into that.
I will argue with your point of view, but I will defend to the death your right to say it kind of situation.
Yeah.
Well, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil, Mark. What do you think about that?
That's always your point of view. Boy. Well, Bilge, thank you so much. I think we really did do justice to this very tough to tackle film. And I feel like I got a lot out of this, even some appreciation that I didn't have before. So this was the ideal way, I think, for me to come to this. And I'm glad that I waited, through all of the reporting on this movie and stuff. I knew, one day we're going to want to do this on the podcast. And that's when I want to dive in. And this was the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. I really do think in Francis Ford Coppola's view, what we're doing right now is Megalopolis. Like the movie is just a conversation starter. The real Megalopolis are the friends we made along the way.
The real Megalopolis was this podcast.
Right.
Well, great. Is there anything that anything cool that you're working on, or anything you want to draw people's attention to? This should come out within a few, I think, like 2 weeks of recording. So.
Okay. So when this comes out, we are probably in the heat of the Mission Impossible Final Reckoning wars. Because I saw it last night. I wrote up my review today, and it's a fascinating movie. It's it's like it actually has. There's a little bit of Megalopolis in there. There is a little bit of, oh wow, there was nobody to say no to these guys. Was there? Like it has it's so just like crazy indulgent, and it's so messy, but then it's also so entertaining that you kind of don't mind it. But it's like it's a thing. It's not like a slick Mission Impossible movie in the tradition of like Ghost Protocol or something. It's very much a, wow, yeah, okay, like, so that happened, huh? Anyway,
that's exciting.
It'll be interesting. I have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, I assume it'll do okay, but it could actually wind up being like a really big hit, or it could wind up being kind of just like a very, very strange little movie that comes out. It's not a little movie at all. It's fucking 3 hours long. But yeah, no. They'll probably. I mean, I have my review coming up, but I don't know that I'll be doing more around it. Maybe I will, but it'll be an interesting time.
All right, maybe I'm gonna have to catch up with the last movie. That was another thing that I put off waiting for, because this was a part 2 of
your
two-part movies, right?
Definitely gonna want to catch up with the previous movie.
Maybe the whole series at this point.
I mean, to be fair, the first hour of the new one has so many montages that it's like trying to catch us up, not just with the previous movie, but also with all the other previous movies. But yeah, you should probably definitely watch the previous. It's also very good. Like, the Dead Reckoning is really good, I think. So it's worth seeing.
Yeah, I'm pretty behind. I've always wanted to just have a big old marathon. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's do it, because I feel like I need to really brush up for this. Okay. But cool. I'm excited. Big, bloated summer entertainment. Let's bring it on.
Exactly.
All right.
I'm feeling bloated.
Bilge, again, thanks again for sharing the riches of your Emersonian mind with us.
And now I'm going to go back to the club.
Oh, I love when he says the club. Oh, my God. And I just hear Francis saying the club. And then Sophia's like, shut the fuck up, Dad.
Unwatchables is produced by Tony Scarpitti, hosted by me, Marc Dottavio, and Seth Troyer, with artwork by Micah Kraus. You can find Seth and I on Letterboxd under Marc Dottavio and Sloth Troyer. You can also check us out at unwatchablespod.com for links to our Twitter and Instagram, or support us on Patreon for bonus content and to have a say in what we watch. Thanks for listening.